This is the story of the Anunnaki, told to me personally by the one known as Enki. There's a lot more to this, more than I have time to record, but this is the part that directly applies to the dynamic going on today. Some elements you may recognize from ancient myths and legends. Others you may find completely unfamiliar. There exists real scholarship on the subject, and more is coming out every day, it seems. But it is often very difficult to tell the difference between real, fantasy, misunderstanding, and disinformation. Hopefully, in the end, it will make sense of the current hodgepodge of myth, error, and disinformation out there on this subject. Long ago, a small party of humanoids came to the star system that includes Earth, looking for resources, mostly biological resources, to rebuild the genetic diversity of their homeworld and heal their genetic wounds after a protracted civil war that culminated in the exchange of biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. We know this group as the Igigi, the first exploratory mission to Earth of the civilization later to have a large presence here, and known in our history as the Anunnaki. They liked Mars best. It was different then, but Earth was interesting too, primarily because of its variety of life, its oceans, and the other quasi-humanoid water-dwelling race they found already exploring it for medicinal compounds and different methods of cellular metabolism that didn't require eating, undersea volcanic vents or literal hotbeds for that kind of research. These were the Wanas, and the Igigi and the Wanas quickly became friends and began to work together as they discovered a strong synergy. Each race had strengths where the other had weaknesses. The Wanas were a very small band indeed. Even their homeworld was sparsely populated, and because of their small number, these gentle beings developed cetacean partners, rather like themselves, to help them do their work on Earth, which inspired the Igigi to develop hominid partners, also rather like themselves. It is no accident that cetaceans and humans tend to form friendships. This ancient relationship has its roots in our respective genetic legacies. Once together, always together. The Igigi and the Wanas worked together for so long that they had started setting up colonies together. These are the roots of the Lemuria and Atlantis myths. Lemuria was a Wanas-centric settlement, and Atlantis was an Igigi-centric settlement. They did not interbreed because they were genetically very distinct and wanted to remain so. In fact, some of the Igigi were violently allergic to the Wanas. Perhaps this is an origin of dangerous human allergies to seafood. But when incompatible proteins didn't interfere, the two races formed a good and comfortable synergy in cooperative work, and many individuals formed deep bonds of friendship. For quite some time things were looking good. Their respective missions were going well. The Wanas achieved food independence, and the Igigi's discoveries had almost healed their world, when one day the Igigi received a communication from their homeworld. "Come home immediately. We have to evacuate our whole population because our star is destabilizing." An unknown force was marching across the cosmos, headed straight for their homeworld, an advancing line of instability that threw each star it touched into deadly convulsions. That line now lies somewhere between Betelgeuse and Sol, only a few years out, and its forerunner effects are already impacting the heliopause, outer planets, and even Earth. Global warming is actually warming of the entire planetary system, as the heliosphere is being compressed by this invading force. Compress anything and it heats up. It is politically incorrect to blame anything but humans for this warming, but in truth the temperature on every other planet has been observed to be climbing rapidly. It's in current scientific literature, and you can confirm this yourself. The Igigi went home, and so did many of the Wanas, as they were not sufficiently numerous to maintain the settlements they had shared with the Igigi. The hominids were set free in the wild, as were the cetaceans. The leader of the Igigi at that time was Nudimmud, the older brother of the homeworld leader, who is known on Earth by his title, An, or confusedly, Anu. Nudimmud had no title, because by tradition he should have been the leader himself. But he was an engineer, a geek, not a politician, so he abdicated and went off-world to get out of the way as his younger brother struggled to manage the complex process of recovery facing their homeworld after the terrible Civil War. Nudimmud found himself recalled to undertake the enormous task of creating methods of conveyance capable of transporting nearly 10 billion people spread across 3 planets in 2 adjacent star systems, to 2 planets they knew would sustain them, Mars and Earth. Meanwhile, Nudimmud's younger nephew, who is known in human history by his title, Enlil, who had established a reputation as an irresponsible screw-up, announced his intention to find a hyperspatial transport system consisting of teleportation waypoints that he had heard about, and in supposed search of this technology very conveniently disappeared and thus avoided working on the main Exodus project. Nudimmud tried his best, but ultimately did not succeed. Their son was beginning to be affected as ours is now, and he went to his brother and resigned yet again, a terrible loss of face in that culture. He passed the responsibility to his elder nephew, Ea, the young man Nudimmud had raised when his brother had set him aside in preference to his eldest legally legitimate son, Enlil. Ea broke up Nudimmud's well-funded but too comfortable and bureaucratic project team, took a few key members off-planet and away from the politics and distractions, and along with a close friend and accomplished pilot known in human history by his title, Anzu, completed a prototype of his uncle's design for a planetary drive that worked. But because of the enormous scale, the success came too late to produce more. The heartbreaking decision was made to put a few of the experienced Igigi, a few senior officials, and a hand-picked group of the best and brightest of the young adults on the prototype planetoid named Nibiru, and send them to safety. Enlil showed up at the last minute, empty-handed, but as official heir, was guaranteed passage. The next mission to the new star system was a sorrowful exodus that took an agonizingly long time compared with the very fast, smaller ships, and that allowed old grudges to fester and political rivalries to divide the population into cliques. The already strained relationship between the 2 sons of An worsened significantly when the planetoid neared the solar system and someone sabotaged the planetary drive. This coincidentally happened after An appointed Ea in charge of the resettlement of Mars, otherwise known as Kiru, and Earth, otherwise known as Ki, in recognition of his success with the planetary drive, and to silently rebuke Enlil for his disappearing act. As a result of the sabotage, the planetoid was left on a disastrous trajectory. Repair could not be accomplished with the resources they had, so alternate means of steering and slowing the planetoid into an orbit were frantically sought. Again the half-brothers came into conflict over the methodology. An hoped to give Enlil an opportunity to redeem himself, so he was given the right to try his method first, which was to use thermonuclear devices to move several planets into different orbits to encourage the planetoid to fall into a gravitational band between them. But one of the planets broke apart, and pieces were sent hurtling inwards and nearly destroyed Mars. Ea was then allowed to pursue his idea, to mine the asteroids for water to use in a series of smaller plasma drives to steer the planetoid as it fell inwards to the Sun, so that it would not collide with anything, to swing around the Sun rather than fall into it, and continue to steer it as it hurtled back out again. This left the planetoid in a very eccentric orbit that was not only terribly elongated, but also tilted to the plane of the ecliptic. But it bought time to mine, to manufacture components, and to rebuild the planetary drive, and to replan their race's entire future. The long period in deep space exceeded the planned mission duration of the planetoid, so new resources for it had to be acquired. Expeditions were sent to Earth to begin the reprovisioning process. These discovered the Wanasgon and the humanoids forming a primitive culture and a religion based on fading memories of their ancestral contact with the original Igigi. It was an easy matter to reintroduce themselves to their former helpers, who were expecting them and who would accept them as returning gods. To be continued. Eridu.